So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and a brand new custom map that we have never seen before. This one made by Green Knight, although I believe he's still going by Red Knight within, Red Knight within the actual game itself. But yeah, Green Knight on Discord. But yeah, anyway, we're going to be seeing the reunited kingdom fighting on the same side today, with both Gondor and the closest representation of Arnor in Arthedain defending this rather large cityscape style settlement. Plenty of good positions for archers, which is always one of the main things when we're talking about, again, a 3v5. Evil factions all across on the attack as well, so plenty of numbers are going to be slamming into this defensive position. So yeah, reasonably solid infantry forces from Arthedain and Gondor, but they will of course be very reliant on their fairly varied skirmishes that both sides do have, especially with regards to their archers. Very interesting settlement here built into the side of the mountains. I don't know whether it's intended to be, well, the map itself is called Highland, but I don't know whether it's the Highlands of Gondor near the White Mountains or whether it's supposed to be within Arthedain. I think based on the fact there are two Gondorian armies, we'll say that it's in Gondor and go with that, especially seeing as Harad and Mordor and Rhun will have a far easier time marching to Gondor than they will to Arnor. So let's see how things develop, shall we? But first of all, we'll go through the attacking armies first and foremost. Red Knight himself, the map creator, playing as one of the runic armies. Carmel's Immortals are an interesting kind of unit, especially when Rhun are on the attack, which they quite often are, marching in step with their evil overlords. The lack of a shield does hurt them a little bit, however, and I'm certain that that will prove to at least be the case in some shape or form, given, like we just mentioned, Arthedain and Gondor do tend to be a little bit more skirmish heavy, but they do perform better than equivalent cost units in melee, generally speaking, a dual wielding unit as well, so your mileage may vary with this unit. They're a little bit easier to use when you're on the defences room, when you can dictate the pace a little bit more. Unsurprisingly, however, we are going to see a very big core of the Lug Flag Rim, the armour piercing, going to be universally useful really against both the Gondorians and the Northern Arthedainians. Again, that's that central force of infantry that they both have. Very much is about packing on the armour. The Gamprim as well, in a similar vein, armour-piercing phalanx, of course, provided by these halberds. But one thing to bear in mind is both Gondor and especially Arnor, actually, both have access to a decent amount of long-range pikes. So it's not, again, a given that the Gamprim will be able to lay down their full effectiveness. But again, in terms of sheer numbers, there's only so much the defenders are going to be able to devote their resources to before having to rely on some heavy quality in their infantry, and if that's the case, the halberds really may come into their own. Scion Rim represent the best defensive unit of infantry that Rhun have. They're not going to be capable of dealing huge amounts of damage, especially to the more elite units that are going to be on the defence today, but they will help hold the runic assault together with how solid they are defensively, with those heightened armour values and the nice shields that they also have. Golden Raiders, a unit of mounted crossbowmen. Recently we've seen the Dunlanders use their own mounted crossbows to pretty devastating effect. The Golden Raiders may not be a bodyguard tier unit, but you can still get similar sort of results out of them, provided you're willing to move them around. It does, of course, make any sort of cavalry sally outs a little bit more tricky as well. We'll see if that's going to be on the menu for the defenders today. A couple of units of Nar Rim with their flaming projectiles, which are more for show than anything, but still, they do look striking, and ultimately they're a decently damaging archer for their tier as well, but of course when you're on the attack you don't always have the luxury of good sight lines. Balkoth Tribesmen, reasonably cost-effective javelin unit as well, not hugely expensive. Again, cavalry tends to be the best way to deal with them, but Rhun can take steps to minimise that likelihood as well. And the javelins, of course, will be useful at dealing with those armoured front lines as well. And then a full rundown, really, of crossbows and the Sapphire Bladesmen, a higher tier javelin unit, but with the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, the high tier specialty crossbows, and the standard Eastron crossbowmen. Good combination here of armour-piercing damage. Moving across to their most immediate allies, we have the Warlord playing as Harad. Harad, they are fairly weak to projectiles overall, but their very strong armour-piercing nature means that, especially against most of the Western Kingdoms of Men, they tend to be both strong and weak against them. But with a little bit of backup from other factions, Harad can find themselves being the cornerstone of any successful attempt to take a settlement like this. The Trollmen, of course, will be central to that as well, with the big armour-piercing damage that they're capable of laying down in this sort of situation. Serpent Guard, for the kind of unit that they are pretty good in melee when it comes to sheer melee stats, and a little bit of the damage on top of that as well with their scimitars, but they do lack a little bit in terms of their defensive stats. The armour is not quite as thick and protective as some of the Western Kingdom's equivalent units are, so it is a trade-off, and it's a trade-off that you don't really want when you're trying to take a settlement, because you'd rather your unit be a little bit more robust, but still, it's small margins when it comes to that kind of unit. The very scary Champions of Nafarat, which is where the General is going to be. And the Champions of Nafarat, of course, huge armour-piercing damage, one of the scarier units of this type that the game has to offer. We also have some Haradrim Spearmen, padding out the numbers of Harad a little bit with the Trollmen, potentially going to march forward in the first wave with more Serpent Guard. The Southron Warband are up to a little bit more than the Haradrim Spearmen in front of them, but still, in terms of stats and, of course, in terms of their own ability to stay alive with that armour, it's not going to be huge, but again, Harad are all about the attack, really, more so than the defence. Several units of Muhard Berserkers here in the tree line, again, staying alive, definitely not their forte, with low melee defence, next to no armour, but good armour-piercing damage off of those bone clubs of theirs. And then, a central facet of many a Haradrim army that we have seen, especially of late, the Mumakil. Monstrous units like this, elephant-class units, can be a real problem if you get them moving. As long as you keep them moving, they can be very, very difficult to stop, even in the defensive confines of a siege like this, but damage will come their way quickly if you allow them to stand still for any length of time. Tintin, going to be playing as Mordor the Olag High. We've seen how monstrous infantry lately, or generally across this whole new version of the game, has been made much more impactful, which is good, because this is the kind of unit that you want to have an impact on the game, more so than it did in the previous patch. The Olag High as well, one of the best versions of this kind of unit that the game has to offer. I think the skin changes in the Entwives may be a little stronger than them, but they're of course part of factions which can't back them up as easily with the numbers that Mordor can, so it is swings and roundabouts there, and obviously again, small margins. Sauron's Will, hidden in and amongst the Orc Maulers, so plenty of arm-piercing damage here. Definitely the angle that Tintin seems to be going for initially with those infantry units. And then spread out, we have the Uruk Halberds, so another halberdier unit, not as good as the Gamp Rim, of course, but more numerous and cheaper, so it does have that going for it. We have the Uruk Infantry in and amongst these ranks as well. Very numerous, of course, individually speaking, not quite onto the same level as the men-at-arms from the Western Kingdoms of Men, but again, Mordor all about those numbers when it comes to their rank and file, and then augmenting that with some units of genuine scary quality, of which the Blackguard of Barad-dûr do have that quality of mass pushing, which is quite scary. It's been quite a while actually since we've seen any sort of mass pushing tactics, but Mordor will be looking to enact that with the Blackguard maybe when the defenders start to tire. It's always a daunting prospect to face this kind of unit when you've been whittled down a little bit. Because if that wasn't enough, more of an armour-piercing presence, this time at long range from the Temple Guard, the fallen Luminorians with their steel bow technology. The Nazgûl, of course, can always be that silent killer. If you put them in and amongst your army as Mordor, it can be very difficult to dislodge them, and the damage they can do is very, very significant. But if they do get isolated, that's where you can have some joy, and high damage projectiles can also be your saviour if you're the defenders. More Uruk infantry there. Another Mordor army under T.S. Niehoff's command. Troll Drummers, of course, now working, unlike in the last patch of the game, or last version of the game. The patches of the test patch have been, they've been functional for quite a while, but it will help keep the orcs pointing in the right direction, which is a very valuable thing indeed, especially when you've gone so fodder heavy as T.S. Niehoff seems to have done. You're going to need to keep those guys pointing in the right direction. Temple Guard, something that will help them as well, is much like the Scion Rim, the Morgul Chosen are a very efficient defensive unit of spears, not the most damaging, but they will keep the army together. So far it's been nothing but functional units really. The Blackguard again with more mass pushing capabilities. Olag High for again big hefty damage per swing. Dealing with these guys across multiple armies is going to be one of the main things that the defenders are going to have to try and contend with. Attacking artillery in a few of the battles more recently has been very important. The Troll Catapult can move quickly, the crew is less vulnerable than many, but again it's going to be difficult in a cityscape to get into the ideal position, but all you need is a few well placed hits and you can really be onto a winner. Melkor's Abominations, another unit similar to the Golden Raiders, only to a far higher extent. They will be really looking to help pin back any sort of cavalry advance that the defenders may have in mind. Uruk Chieftains, a basic unit of bodyguard in the grand scheme of things, especially for Mordor, but they'll be doing their thing. And also the Beasts of Gorgoroth, individually not quite as scary as the Mumakil. There are far more of them after all, so they will melt away even more quickly. They're very much a flash in the pan kind of unit, almost like a living, disposable battering ram where you move through the enemy. They slowly start to fall away as they do at a far faster rate than the Mumakil, but the chaos they can sow can be potentially even greater because there's so many of them. So interesting to see that. I mean, it's very much going to be an army designed for a single moment with all the Blackguard and with these beasts. The rest of the army is less substantial, but perhaps that's where their allies can come into play, with Tommy playing as Umbar. Again, Umbar certainly the most quality-centric of all the attacking factions today. Harbingers of Castamere represent that perhaps better than most, the only heavy swordsman, elite heavy swordsman anyway, on display for the attackers. Very, very effective, of course. We have the Corsairs, plenty of them. Of course, Umbar can field more numerous armies, with the pirates really taking the lion's share of that responsibility. Corsairs unshielded as well, so they'll be ripped apart if they get involved in any sort of skirmish battle. We have the Balagai footmen, who are fully upgraded with that black Númenórean plate armour, so for a basic unit of spears this really does elevate them to another level in terms of their survivability. Still not particularly damaging, of course, in fact very, very undamaging. And when you add the spear malus on top of that, that can be a pretty significant problem, but they will be here simply to stay alive. We have some Balagai archers, Corsair blackguards, so more javelins, which will be pressurising those defences. A couple of units of Merc crossbows, mounted crossbows, have been pretty popular recently, it would seem, and again more manoeuvrability as well as the punch of those crossbows, and then getting into the quality infantry corps that Umbar do tend to bring. 4 units of Alcarondas Legion is a big ask for the defenders to stop in their tracks when you combine it with the heft of those Mordor monsters and the savagery of Harad and Rhun. Narun Aru Sentinels as well, and then their own armour piercing in the shape of these Umbar Axguard, armoured up as well. So, for the defenders, what do they have in store? Because that is a pretty comprehensive attacking force, going to be difficult for them. Medexa has got the Lords of Gondor, so, I mean, if they charge out of the settlement early doors, it will be like Faramir's attempt to retake Osgiliath, because they'll get slaughtered, I would imagine. They're going to have to be patient with their cavalry, or at least be surgical with them and be a little bit more defensive and keep them in cover until late on. We'll see what their fate brings. Athelian Rangers are going to be absolutely vital. The huge damage that Rangers are capable of laying down is going to be necessary here for the defenders to have any good fortune. Based on the look of things, it may be that there are 2 units of Nimlothian Honour Guard. I mean, high amounts of quality is also how Gondor can do well here, in conjunction with the unshielded regular Fountain Guard. I mean, that's a lot of damage and a lot of defensive nous from those spearmen. Fully upgraded veterans of Osgiliath. I mean, counter-skirmishing doesn't seem like it's going to be that important, given that for the most part Mordor have got a couple of archers, Rhun have brought a few as well, Umbar 1 or 2, but not a huge skirmishing force from the attackers, more brute strength. But if they do get involved in any sort of skirmishing, the veterans of Osgiliath, one of the best because of their huge armour. That's where the general is as well, by the looks of things, so trying to keep him out of harm's way for a little while. More Athelian Rangers, regular Gondor archers in and amongst the ranks as well, regular Gondor spears, mostly seeing at least 1 level of armour upgrade, and many of them having the full plate as well, taking advantage of that Gondor discount. The Vanguard of King Elisar being a very strong unit of 2-handed swordsmen, plenty of javelins as well, Pelagia Marines being the more dedicated javelin unit, Citadel Guard more of a hybrid unit between very heavy spears and those javelins, of course, and that armour-piercing punch is going to be necessary, dealing damage at the right time. It's going to have to be wise with their projectiles here. Fully upgraded Gondor infantry as well. The northern contingent of this army, the Arthedainian one, Knights of Anumnus again, a single cavalry unit, which is all well and good, but they're going to have to be very careful. The Knights of Anumnus all round are a little bit more effective than the Lords of Gondor. They are one of the strongest units of all-round cavalry the game has to offer after all, but they will die just the same if they charge forth and get kited around by crossbows. That cannot be the case for Hidden's forces here. Wards of the North, so some defensive armour-piercing archers as well. They have the advantage of terrain, but they still need to be careful of their opposite numbers from Mordor. High Lords of Anumnus, representing the most elite unit of infantry that Arthedain can field. Very defensive in nature, of course. They've got some really good defensive stats and will stay alive for a long, long time. but they're going to need to stay standing and get a good kill count as well, given the discrepancies here. A gap, which may mean rangers or troll slayers. Arthedain marksman fully upgraded, so yeah, counter skirmishing shouldn't be an issue for the forces of Arnor and Gondor combined, especially given the attacking compositions. Numinous Gate Guards, looks like 2 units of them, so going into the red limit is maybe not the worst idea for elite pikes, because they're going to need to keep the enemy at bay somehow. Arthedain Spearmen with upgrades. We've got the defenders of Fornos. They should be pretty effective against especially the more lightly armoured Orcs and Haradrim that are on the attack today, so plenty of those heavy swordsmen, and we've got some Arthedain Spearmen at the back as well. But yeah, there's almost certainly some Dunedain skulking around somewhere as well. And the final defending army is another Gondorian force, this one in a great big blob as well. Winged swordsmen. Here we've got some Gondor infantry, Gondor spears again, some armour upgrades, some not. We've got some Athelian rangers, veterans of Osgiliath, the defending trebuchet, which we've seen recently. In the very last battle was the first time in a while that defending artillery had really done an excellent job. They're going to need the trebuchet to do an excellent job because of the odds they're facing here. If it doesn't, if it's wasted, if they put it into a position and then it starts spinning on the spot like we've seen several times recently due to indecision, it's potentially a match-losing move in a 5v3, so we will see. It's, again, potentially a huge amount of damage, both mentally and physically. Morale breaks can be a thing, but they're going to need it here. Athelian Rangers, the general is in Veterans of Osgiliath once again. Again, all of those Rangers. We've got more Javelins as well, Citadel Guard. Pretty much the same sort of thing. Again, a unit of Nimlothian Honour Guard in there as well. Vanguard of King Elisar. So plenty of quality, plenty of defensive nous here, but they're going to need those high damage units to do the business. Otherwise, I don't think they'll be able to hold out against the sheer odds they're facing off against here. But we'll see. I will make a little bit of a cut. I can't imagine it'll be too long because all the attackers are right there. Really just the time it takes for them to advance upon the walls, and then we'll get this battle underway. So yeah, I'll make a cut and I'll rejoin when the first blows are being struck. The manpower reserves that the attackers have are certainly quite intimidating for the defenders, but I feel as though, having a look at this settlement as well, there are some pretty good positions where, in particular, the high damage skirmishes that Gondor and Arthedain of the reunited kingdom do have, and they could be used to pretty devastating effect here. There is also the fact that some of the attacking armies are maybe a little bit more focused around smaller, more monstrous units, which can, of course, give a lot of forward momentum very, very quickly, but do come with their share of risks as well. We'll see if this is one of those situations where the defending artillery can really come into its own as well. I think they will need it. In particular, the psychological impacts it could have on particularly the hordes of orcs that are waiting for them could prove to be very, very important. There's more narrow corridors as well over on this side of the settlement, I think in particular. Athelian Rangers in a nasty looking position, and I think it's I don't know whether this is by intent or whether it's by accident, but the heavier, more resilient archers are on the front, and they're the ones more likely to have to engage with some back and forth with the attacking skirmishers. The Mumakil in the far distance there, lumbering through the tree lines. Pelagia Marines, I mean, I still think the cavalry investment from the defenders is maybe a little bit overblown, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Secondary defensive lines already being set up away into the settlement, which has already been surrendered for the most part, but a good opportunity for some crossfire as well, using the structures within the settlement to their advantage. I thought the battle was about to get underway, to be honest, with the Mordor orcs lumbering towards the front entrance of the settlement, but that has not yet proven to be the case. Plenty of the standard Gondorians moving over here, ready to meet the Umbar forces over on this side. A different proposition to the other forces on the attack today, in the sense that they can more easily go toe-to-toe in terms of quality with the defenders today, but plenty still of the armour piercing from Harad and Rhun. Perhaps even more of a worry actually for the defenders today, given how reliant they're going to be on how efficient their more heavily armoured troops can be at absorbing that punishment, which is undoubtedly going to be coming their way. Gondor archers loitering with intent. Got their pauldrons, but not their full plate. Rhun going to be taking the lead over here, defensive lines going to be set up. Gondor spearmen on the front, fully upgraded as they are. That is always going to be of some benefit, of course, but against Rhun with their plentiful armour piercing, is it really going to be the be-all and end-all? Probably not. Elsewhere, I mean, this frontal area is probably going to be one of the sites of the more violent fighting, you would say. I mean, that is where the trebuchet will prove to be most useful. Wardens of the North heading uphill as well. Already noted in the composition phases the fact that both sides will have access to some pretty nasty armour-piercing skirmishes, but the defenders should have an easier time using theirs. Again, another tool that they will need to use to its fullest. Everyone's still just waiting for the time being, for the opportune moment to strike. Plenty of Gondor infantry on the front. Again, trying to coax the attackers in. Veterans of Osgiliath could then hit them in the back. Citadel Guard ready to hit them from the side as well with javelins. Umbar starting to move forwards now. Wardens of the North pulling back a bit. Some action happening over on this side with Rhun the first ones to get fully into range of the defending forces. Gondor archers starting to fire away. What is their choice of targets? Eastron crossbows by the looks of things, and that is a very worthwhile target. Unupgraded as they are as well. Well, partially unupgraded. Only the helms to their name. Connell's Immortals not the initial target. Again, if they can be efficient with their regular skirmishes, that's also going to be something which really pays dividends as the battle goes on. Marksman. Some attacking artillery trying to do its thing as well, and that's not a start which the defenders would have been particularly thrilled about. I mean, a direct hit, an unfortunate direct hit from a defending point of view right into the Fountain Guard, but they're going to need to move their units now. They can't afford to keep them bunched up like this because the artillery clearly has zeroed in on them. Troll Catapult with its swift movement, able to make nuisances of themselves very, very quickly. No second invitation needed for the attackers to start claiming some territory within the settlement. There's a lot of wasted ammunition as well. I can understand Hidden's worry about putting his rangers further forward because it gives them, or it gives the attackers, a very good opportunity to counter skirmish, but you can't afford to be wasting ammunition like that either. It's almost as bad. It's not quite as bad because you can still use the Dunedain Rangers as a melee unit later on if fewer of them die to counter skirmishing, but ultimately the main thing you want them for is their ability to do damage with the extremely high damage projectiles that Rangers come equipped with. Still no immediate rush to move in over here. Umbar moving a little bit further forwards under the cover of that Troll Catapult fire, which I did see another boulder go overhead, and I mean, this looks like more damage was done to the Fountain Guard as well. There were 100, now they're at 90. If Winged Swordsman isn't going to learn his lesson, then Umbar can continue. Was that another hit? Surely not. Still 90. And very content to just leave his unit there, which is mad to me. We'll see. Arthedain Marksman in place. Further over here are Rhun committing their units forward. Doesn't look like it. In fact, it looks as though a charge took place by the Lords of Gondor here. Pretty successful one as well. I mean, they're going to need more of that, the defenders, with their cavalry, seeing as that's how they've committed their resources, but that's a pretty good start to that. Of course, Rhun can try and counteract that by leading the way with spearmen. Scion Rim, very effective example of such as well. Athelian Rangers starting to shoot into the sides. I mean, if you take away the shield bonus to their range defense, hitting them in the back could well still be worthwhile considering the damage of Rangers, and Scion Rim do represent one of the harder nuts to crack among the ranks of the attackers today. Just having a look further afield. Ooh, hello. Knights of Annuminus counter-attacking as well. Another good example of the defenders at least starting to use their cavalry quite nicely. good charge into the Uruk infantry there. Again, like I said, they're going to need plenty more of that as the battle goes along, if this is to play out as they would have wanted. Design Rangers, a little bit of counter-fire has come in. It does give them the opportunity to get those nicer angles, like I said. Ooh, the mercenary crossbows moving in as well. Pretty decent angle into the Gondor infantry. I mean, this is the sort of unit that you can't really afford to ignore, so the Gondor archers are going to have to shoot into them. And to be fair, even if they miss the mercenary crossbows, they're going to hit something over here because of how dense the Umbar forces are, so you may as well fire in. Fully upgraded Balagaya footman in here to prevent any sort of cavalry counter-attacks, of course. Still taking a lot of damage. I mean, this is the sort of thing which can really add up quite quickly for defenders. Unfortunately for winged swordsman, there's not much he can really do considering how he's set things out here. He's going to have to rely on counter-skirmishing for the time being. And Tommy's doing a good job of trying to shield his units from that sort of thing. Not been the best of starts for the Gondorians, though. Get another couple of hits. I mean, the attacking artillery, once again, it's been the case in battles of late. Attacking artillery seems to have had the rub of the green, where the defending artillery has not. But there's still plenty of time left in the battle for the defending trebuchet to inflict far greater levels of pain. Arthedain spearmen being joined by the defenders of Fornost, and very easy prey indeed in the shape of the orc fodder that they will have to try and deal with. If there aren't any sort of reinforcements forthcoming pretty quickly, they will struggle, but Uruk infantry all the way forwards. Some more depleted examples of the units as well. The fully upgraded Gondor infantry should be pretty comfortable, especially with how spread out the orcs actually are. Citadel Guard just in behind as well. Defending archers still doing a good job here, the Gondor archers. I mean, this one unit of Gondor spearmen, they're trying to be efficient with it. You can tell here what the Gondorians are trying for. Trade one unit of Gondor spearmen for a far greater number of Easterlings slain in the initial stages. They will achieve that, but whether or not it's efficient enough is always the question in a siege like this. There's a lot of arrows coming in though. I mean, the Carmel's Immortals, we mentioned in the deployment phase how they can struggle in this sort of situation because of their lack of a shield, but in this situation it wouldn't have actually mattered if they had a shield or not, considering their backs are turned to the projectiles that are being aimed at them. And the Gondor spearmen shaken, surrounded as they are, and also getting hit by friendly fire, so they know they've been left to die essentially. Unfortunate for them, but they may yet serve their country well. Other Gondorian defensive lines, I mean, to be fair, over here the only route you can really take as Rhun is to actually meet up directly with your allies. So the Gondorians, I mean, they could take a shortcut through here as well, so a bit labyrinthine, but one of the things that Rhun will probably be looking to do is meet up with Mordor and Harad here in the middle, because if they can do so, a lot of the Gondorian forces that are over here will find themselves horribly exposed, so time will tell on that. But plenty of arrows coming in again. That attacking artillery managing to score another hit, this time into Arthedain marksman. Of course, as the attackers move forward, they're going to find themselves in compromising positions in terms of the defending skirmishers managing to score good hits. There's a lot of units moving forward though, still not quite ready to begin the attack over here, nor are the Umbar forces ready to do the same, although the Balagaya archers did move forward and it looks like they got roundly slaughtered as they did so. Defending archers doing their thing as well. The Gondor infantry, sort of a death by 1,000 cuts feel to the engagement over here between Gondor and Umbar, as the Merc crossbows continue to do their bits of damage. Narrow miss. One of few misses we've actually seen from that artillery so far. Those one to the north taking damage. Attacking skirmishers and... Ooh, actually, based on the layout of those units, I'm wondering if that was an artillery hit actually. If that's the case, then that troll catapult has been an absolute menace in this battle, but if it was javelins or attacking skirmishers, then fair enough. That trebuchet has got a big act to follow. It's going to need to do significantly better than the attacking artillery, which, to be fair, already it's causing problems in terms of that morale for the attackers, so they'll be hoping for more of that. Defenders of Fornost victory seems certain, which is surprising actually, considering the presence of the Olag High here, but in all fairness, the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, as much as they're trying to enact a mass push, it looks as though it's steadily failing. And a bit of cavalry coming in as well. Cavalry is high mass, of course. They may not be as big as regular units, but it's a novel way to try and stop a classic Mordor mass push. It seems to be helping, if nothing else. The Numinous Gate Guards will be moving in, because ultimately the line shape is compromised, even if the line as a whole is not. I'm really struggling to see what an Earthwing Swordsman is trying to do with his trebuchet here. I mean, he's clearly trying to hit these units over here. But the price of doing so, to get friendly fire on Dunedain Troll Slayers, cardinal sins being committed here. I mean, already with the kind of missteps the defenders have made, 3v5s, very, very unforgiving. We'll see if they can dig themselves out of the admittedly small hole they've dug for themselves so far, but let's see. Scion Rim. Rhun have managed to make their way forwards again. For Red Knight, I think it's more of a case of trying to limit the casualties that this Gondorian plan is clearly going to inflict on them. Gondor Spears and Infantry, again, decent in terms of what they offer as a rank and file unit, but Rhun are better equipped than most to deal with this kind of force. Let's see if they're able to do that. We've got Gondor Archers, Ithelian Rangers revealing themselves again. The kind of damage the Rangers can inflict in these corridors, the sort of thing which is pretty difficult. Again, what are you doing? What on earth are you doing? This is one of the most brainless decisions I think I've seen. The prize is a big one, admittedly, because all these units are clustered over here, but you're getting nothing but friendly fire. Is this going to pay off? I mean, not really, honestly. I mean, you're getting hits on Temple Guard and on Melkor's Chosen, but, or Melkor's Abominations, but damn. What a bizarre choice. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, I mean, they're probably going to end up routing as a result of that. That looked like it was more like it. As the units start to pour on through. Arthedain marksmen trying to use their fire arrows, so clearly morale is a weapon that the defenders can use here, and something that they are wielding to decent effect. Again. Those are looking more like it. Again, orc fodder only really being killed, but it's the sort of thing which can add up over time. Meanwhile, Umbar now sweeping forward, trying to join in with the rest of their attacking allies here. Gondor Archers being pressed into melee service fairly early in the grand scheme of things. Balagaya footmen trying to push their way through, which again seems like a bizarre choice. One of the attacking generals falls, the central Mordor army, which has been placed under quite a lot of duress early on here, to be honest. And Lothian Honour Guard definitely going to be one of the stronger individual units that the defenders have at their disposal, whether or not they're going to be able to last too long isolated as they are. They're going to need a little bit of help, perhaps. The unit itself is pretty stretched. Some Balagaya footmen and some Alcarondas Legion over here engaging with the Citadel Guard. Again, Umbar are a little bit scattered at the moment, but it's quite a large surface area they're having to deal with. And over here, doing a little bit better, Umbar Axe Guard moving in, trying to deliver that armor-piercing damage. And Alcarondas Legion doing the business as well. Bit of a weird shape to this engagement. I mean, usually chaos like this in the long run favours the attackers. We'll wait and see if that is the case. Of course, our Blackguard's trying to get out of there. Rotting meat. I mean, the sheer amount of flies that are buzzing around this one unit of Gondor Archers, but undeterred as they are at the moment. One thing I will say is all of the mass pushes from the attackers so far have failed. You can see here all of the beasts of Gorgoroth have fallen, and a big part of that will be because pikes, of course, do extremely high damage to elephant class units. Less so against trolls, of course, but that's where other units can start to come into their own. This, however, is a concern, surely, for the defenders. One defence is completely crumbled. Again, I'm really confused as to why the trebuchet was not targeting down this section of the line right from the start, rather than going for the more difficult shot, which resulted in friendly fire. It's a bemusing decision to me. But Mordor and Harad claiming the momentum now, and this is going to result in areas of the defence being compromised. I mean, is this the moment where you maybe think about taking a step back? Mumakil now moving forward. I mean, the Beasts of Gorgoroth looking a little bit thin on the ground, following many of them getting minced up by those pikemen. Lothian Honour Guards still holding from the front. Javelins, defeat is a distinct possibility for them, which in melee is no great surprise. And now, in the midst of all of this chaos, the Haradrim Trollmen are also on the way forward, which is not a class of unit which either Arthedain or Gondor really have the best facilities to deal with. As a result of some of their units getting through here, they might be able to get T.S. Niehoff's Mordor forces in here as well, though the slightly more unorthodox Mordor army. Less numbers to be able to pour into the settlement, but that's not something the attackers seem to be struggling too much for. Arthedain Rangers going to try and get into place. I mean, their axes in melee may prove to be quite useful as well. The Athelian Rangers pulling out their side swords and trying to help fight back against Umbar. Citadel Guard doing a good job so far. The Arthedain General, though. Cavalry. I mean, this battle has grown so chaotic that it's actually very difficult to keep track of some of these units. I mean, Grey Company could prove to be absolutely devastating if used to their fullest, but they seem to just be running around the settlement like headless chickens at the moment. Umbar. In all fairness, the support of the Grey Company and the support of the cavalry in general does seem to have helped against Umbar, but whether it's going to be enough long term to be able to hold back against the enhanced quality that they have as the general as well. In a bit of danger, but probably fancying their chances. Harbingers of Castamere actually right at the forefront, trying to go after the veterans of Osgiliath. They will have to kill them to the last man, of course, with that locked morale of theirs. Of course, their blackguards in a nice position as well. I have to say, I think the attackers are in a good position going forwards here. Grey Company still charging around. I mean, this defensive position over here, the problem is like Rhun. These Gondorians are effectively cut off at this point. Rhun won't be changing how they deal with things, but the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that they'll get support from behind. I'm sure that the attackers were probably thinking that it would be Rhun coming to the aid of Mordor and Harad rather than the other way round, but either way works for the attackers' purposes. Another defending general falls. Veterans of Osgiliath. Lords of Gondor still alive, but again, they do have one place they can retreat to, but at this point, is it worth it? Or will the defenders simply throw everything onto the front that they started defending? Throw caution to the wind and try and win the battle from the front. It's not impossible, of course. Surely the trebuchet has not run out of ammunition already. They're going to need that trebuchet to do the business, which, I mean, to be fair, the quality is fighting back pretty hard here. The Fountain Guard, a few of the Arthedain spears as well, facing off against the Temple Guard, Sauron's most loyal Black Númenóreans. We had Beast Hunters in place. I mean, that's something we have noticed here and there, is that the attackers have been able to get javelins into good positions as well. All of this, combined with the artillery play earlier on, it's a sort of damage which can really add up. Only one of the Mumakil remains. again, a factor of all of the anti-cavalry that the... And there goes the last one, but all of the hefty units again friendly fire, and again routing their own units. That's, I mean, maybe a little bit of desperation there, because it is the trollman, and ultimately the marksmen were going to lose that fight anyway, but the use of that trebuchet has been questionable, shall we say. Champions of Nafarat doing their thing. More hits coming in. Again, they're getting hits, but they've got a lot to make up for with that trebuchet, and I'm not sure they can do it with the amount of ammunition they have left to them. Umbar are starting to make inroads as well. They've taken damage over here for sure, Umbar, but the more territory seized, the more difficult the defender's task becomes long term. Veterans of Osgiliath fighting to the bitter end against the Troll Catapult crew, but they've certainly already paid their dues. Anything else they can do in melee is only going to be a bonus. Not a huge amount of reinforcements. Now Umbar Axguard moving up here, chasing down the Athelian Rangers. It's very difficult to keep track in a battle this chaotic of which skirmishers have used up their ammunition supplies and which haven't, but for each archer that hasn't used up all of its ammunition, that is another significant win for the attackers. Troll drummers keeping the nearby units fighting. I mean, to be fair, this is probably the one front line. I mean, Harad are now attacking it from the rear, but this would have been the one front line where the defenders actually would have pulled out an unquestioned victory. Maybe the cavalry is the saviour here. Champions of Nafarat taking a big hit there. That's the sort of thing the trebuchet needs to do more of, considering the friendly fire it's already accrued. Still some Gondorians fighting over here. Pelagia Marines going to be pinned up against the cliff wall by the advancing runic spears and halberds. Victory seems certain for them. Lothians, defeat almost a certainty. Golden Raiders, I mean, we've seen mounted crossbows already be effective from Umbar. We may have missed it from Rhun. Excuse me. Knights of Anuminus loitering. High Lords of Anuminus down here as well, only 9 of them remaining, getting involved with the fight, managing to mop up a few of the runic defenders here. I mean, to be fair, the defenders look as though they're actually going to turn things around over here. Not many of them remain. Again, it's a high possibility that all of those archers will have played their part. It's actually going to be looking like the two flanking forces of Tommy's Umbar army and Red Knight's runic army are going to be the ones to have to get the attackers over the line. There goes the Harad general. Champions of Nafarat fighting hard. Victory for the attackers over there. They could make their way around, but this is going to be a battle which is decided entirely within the first layer of the cityscape, so the defenders electing not to ultimately retreat to this part of the settlement, which, considering the extreme terrain advantages they have over here, could be viewed as a bit of a mistake, but they also didn't really have a particularly good opportunity to retreat in an orderly manner. Still 32 Lords of Gondor, that's a big force of cavalry to have late on, especially considering most of the monstrous units from the attackers have perished. Merc crossbows in pure melee terms would be no match for them after all. Citadel Guard fighting back to back against Umbar that have them surrounded. Rhun starting to round the corner as well. No defensive line yet ready to assist them. High Lords of Anuminus coming over here to help finally finish off the Temple Guard. It's proven to be a rather stretched affair. Like I said, I think all of the archers up on the high ground positions have been used pretty well by the defenders. They aren't retreating now. Are they retreating with enough? Is it even worth retreating with all of this? Unless they have ammunition, I wouldn't have thought so. We shall see. Still the trebuchet crew. They themselves being Gondorian spearmen, of course. Another attacking general falls. Loss of attacking generals always more significant, of course. Morale is a weapon which the defenders often need to wield like a cleaver. And finally, the Gondorians do fall over here. Decent number of attackers still left over here, but many of them skirmishes. Over here, meanwhile, Rhun trying to keep up the pressure. Standard unit of Gondor archers. One level of armour upgrade, the only thing to stand in their way. I don't know how long they will withstand Scion Rim and other dedicated runic infantry units without support. Veterans of Osgiliath will be joining. More used to this kind of engagement, but mercenary crossbows getting caught out by a mere 12 Arthedainian spears. I don't want to stick around for too long there. And Lothian Honor Guard is still alive over here. It's strange how all of these engagements have devolved into essentially these very small sporadic brawls throughout the settlement at this point. Troll drummers trying to bring the Honor Guard down. And then Umbar, their Axe Guard. Umbar's forces are... some of them are going around already. I thought they were going to be regrouping considering what they've been doing up until this point, but starting to move already. I mean, there's not too much longer left in this battle, to be honest. Proving to be a close affair indeed. The trebuchet, can it do the business? I mean, it clearly hit centre mass of these units. Big damage done to these E-strong crossbows. More of the runic forces moving forwards, trying to crunch their way through these Gondorian lines. Vets of Osgiliath. Not a huge amount in reserve from the defenders, but there rarely is going into the latter stages of such a fight. Lords of Gondor charging in. They will need to make sure their cycle charges are short and sharp here, otherwise the kind of damage they can take at the hands of crossbowmen is going to be extremely significant, but a good initial charge if nothing else. They will be hoping for more of that. Although the Rim doing their best to kill off more of those Gondorian riders as they try to retreat. Scion Rim continuing to be the bulwark of the runic army. As well as that, again another good hit, the trebuchet making up for its earlier transgressions here. Whether it's enough will depend on the overall outcome of the battle. Some runic forces managing to force their way through, but if they were to choose anything, it probably wouldn't have been the Gamp Rim. They would probably have preferred them in the static fight within the buildings. As it is, they're going to be, well, their formation is going to be compromised and they're going to be cut down by the veterans of Osgiliath, which is actually Medex's general. The vanguard of King Elisar moving forward as well. 34 of them remain, but still, that sort of quality is nothing to be sniffed at in late stages. Lords of Gondor trying to cycle charge Umbar. Little nook in the settlement over here. Firing port, which wasn't really utilised earlier on. And to be fair, one thing that I was concerned about from a defending point of view was the investment in cavalry, but so far that has proven to be actually quite wise. Again, Lances getting down. Alcarondas Legion and Harbingers of Castamere going to be the ones to bear the brunt of that damage. I mean, Athelian Rangers Some very depleted Nimlothian Honor Guard and Citadel Guard. It's mostly Madex's Gondor army that remains at this point. There's not really much from Arthedain left at all. There's a few things from Winged Swordsman's Gondor army, but the northern contingent of this particular defending force mostly spent. Gondor archers actually holding up reasonably well. I mean, the Scion Rim are not the most damaging unit. One of the exceptions to the runic rule of armor piercing is the way. Rhun gonna try and go the longer way around by the looks of things. I mean, can they cover every angle? This is going to be a worry as well. These Golden Raiders are going to prove to be a real annoyance, you would imagine. Forward shuffle the Umbar Axe Guard as well. Strong crossbows. We've seen this before, of course, recently as well, where the defenders were undone in the late game by the fact that the attackers still had crossbow bolts left to their name, and that could well prove to be the case yet again. Especially if their positions start to get more compromised. Our Axe Guard, they're only here really to pin these defending units in place for more of those crossbow bolts to hit their intended marks. Cavalry sweeping forward, still those Lords of Gondor, but the Gamp Rim cleaned up ultimately. Will the Trebuchet do the business here? Could it yet be the hero? The hero and the villain for the defenders in this battle so far. Thinking about it, Medieval 2 artillery certainly moves at its own pace. Balkal Sapphire Bladesmen as well. More punchy projectiles being deployed by the attackers. That sort of thing being brought forward in the late game is really difficult to counter if you don't have any projectiles of your own, if you've dumped them all early. Which is probably why the defenders have been able to inflict so much damage on the attackers, to be fair, so swings and roundabouts, I suppose. Still no real signs of progress from Rhun over here. I think this is more of a distracting measure at this point. Well, that must be the end of the Arthedainian force, whatever was left from them. Veterans of Osgiliath now moving forward. Harbingers of Castamere are in here. One unit of veterans is all well and good, but they're going to need to have some quality in here, or at least something to do damage very quickly. The Trebuchet needs to be the thing to do that. Through no fault of Winged Swordsman's this time is the fact that the Trebuchet just seems to be sat there. It says it's firing missiles, but it's not actually doing anything. And more Alcarondas Legion are arriving. I think the attackers will probably be okay. Some defending forces did retreat all the way. Well, routed all the way, I guess I should say. Nope, still 2 Gondor infantry. Everything needs to be committed at this point, though, you would suggest. Victory seems certain. Here come the Umbar Axe Guard. The Vanguard. Fighting hard, but 34 of them is a relatively small number. I mean, the Trebuchet crew, if this were the Trebuchet of Numenor, you would have slightly more damaging units. I mean, 110 spears late on is still not the worst thing to be able to call upon. Alongside the veterans of Osgiliath, who of course are locked morale. This is where the defending final stand is going to have to take place at this point, because they're getting largely cut off and all of their high ticket units are still up here. Sapphire Bladesmen out of ammunition by the looks of things, so their Falxes have been drawn. Decently damaging, of course, the sort of thing which can crunch through that Vanguard armour. Gondor archers And veterans still doing a good job against the Scion Rim, but it's largely a fight which is going to go no one's way in the long run. I mean, if the trebuchet did have ammunition left, it's a moot point at this stage, because they're going to have to fight in melee whether they like it or not. Good damage being done. Alcarondas Legion. Yeah, I mean, there's a few... Well, I say that, not really. I mean, it is pretty much entirely Rhun and Umbar from the flanks. Those middle armies of the two Mordor forces and the Haradrim army really did take a beating from the defenders, but there was only so much punishment to go round, it looks like. And in the end, I think, considering the quality levels, there are no danger of being routed into oblivion here, Gondor. They will have to be killed off the old-fashioned way, so to speak, but Footman flanking around as well. The surround is complete. I think it's going to be the slow end for the defenders here. They are shaking the Balakai Footman, to be fair. Trebuchet crew. Only 4 Harbingers of Castamere remain. There's still crossbows as well, which is the thing which ultimately means there's really no hope for the defenders. Even if they fight their way out of the infantry at the top, they're still going to get last samurai'd by all of the bolts that are going to be heading their way from the remnants of Red Knight's army. Specialty projectiles from the Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well. Yeah, and you can see how quickly actually things have deteriorated as a result of those crossbow bolts. Only 7 of the Vanguard of King Elisar remain, all of them bloodied as well. Every volley lays more of them low. They are going to win over here, but it will be a consolation victory only, you would suggest. Further back, still some Golden Raiders left alive, interestingly enough. Scimitars and shields drawn. A few Naru and Aru Sentinels. Pretty much only Rhun actually left when you look at it like this. There's not really much of Umbar left at all either. It's a smaller army generally speaking anyway, but only a few Alcarondas Legion and scattered Balagai units remain, 1 or 2 Harbingers, but Rhun will stand largely alone. The outcome of this. Bolts. And that's crossbows, of course, accomplished in melee. 97, probably the most elite unit still left on the field. And the final defending general falls in defence of his settlements. What have we here? Not much. Going to send forward the crossbows to finally finish them off, because there's nothing left of the units up here. Celebrations. There's 1 unit of Narum actually still in the outer layer. Having a look at the 4-5% seems about right. It was close in terms of casualties in the midsection. Like I said, 5v3s are so unforgiving to the defenders. The defenders didn't do much wrong, and like I said, the friendly fire from the trebuchet was madness, and it came about as really a result of, if you were going to go after those units over on that choke point, you needed to reposition the trebuchet, because it's not worth the risk in that sort of situation ultimately. But ultimately the choices of targets from ranged units must have been pretty good throughout. I mean, the examples we saw as we kept track of things were, and ultimately it being as close as it was is a sign that the defenders were doing their due diligence with their archers and javelins. But also the attackers deserve quite a lot of credit, I think. Use of their crossbow bolts, their javelins, the troll catapult as well. Probably not as impressive in terms of kills as the defending trebuchet ultimately, but in terms of relative efficiency, the attackers require less of units like that in order to be able to pull out the victory. And ultimately they were able to get some really good banked shots into significant units as well, stuff like Fountain Guard. Big difference makers. Veterans of Osgiliath being utterly surrounded by Eastron crossbowmen with those short swords of theirs. There they go. Is that the end? No, there's still fighting going on. Nope, that is the end. So what remains? Gondor archers, but they're routing, and ANORIEN doing their thing. Gondor infantry also routing. I guess we'll just say that that is the end, because I can't see where else the engagement would be. But yes, an attacker victory, and a deserved attacker victory as well, I think. But yeah, nice to see another themed battle. Most of them have been a bit hodgepodge of late. Revisits of old maps as well, but this is a new map with a defined theme, which is nice to see. Having a look at the kills, which is always a little bit of a strange one when you're looking at, especially the attacker kills, because very often it's how they move and how much territory they can seize more so than the kills they get. The kills kind of take care of themselves after a certain point, but Umbar doing a good job. I mean, to be fair, Umbar's army was actually one of the larger ones, but a big part of that, I think, is the fact that Mordor did go a little bit more quality heavy, did go a little bit more monstrous in terms of the units that they were going with. Umbar also bringing a fair amount of Corsairs. Again, defenders, lots of kills, but 5v3s, very, very unforgiving. And based on the fact that Hidden, he was the first defending army to fall, but also Arthedain, in terms of damaging projectiles, probably have the edge over Gondor. Gondor a little bit more defensive in nature and survivable, generally speaking. So that's probably a big point of difference there, but very similar when you've got a spread of 3,800 to near 4,600. So let's see what did the damage for the runic attacking army, the most healthy army come the end of the game. Not many kills inflicted by the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, but they were only used right near the end really as the finisher. Balkos Sapphire blazing with 138, that's not bad. A fair few of them would have been in melee. Narim doing decently. I mean, you're not expecting big numbers from attacking armies like this in a 5v3. Anything that breaks 100 kills. I mean, 394 from a unit of Scion Rim is actually pretty damn impressive for an attacking unit. I mean, it doesn't matter how those kills come about when you consider the proportions of the armies. Getting nearly 400 kills with a unit of Spearman is pretty damn good. A few units getting 100 as well. Maybe armor piercing wasn't the be-all and end-all here, but it was actually Rhun's slightly more resilient nature. I mean, among the evil men factions, they don't have quite the same level of armor, perhaps, as some of the Western kingdoms, but they are more resilient and certainly stronger all-rounders than many of the other evil men forces. And that, combined with their armor piercing and their crossbow bolts here, I think, was one of the things which saw the attackers over the line, but certainly not the only thing. So yeah, big thank you to Red Knight, or Green Knight, depending on where it is you're speaking to him, for making this map and for allowing me to show the battle replay as well. Big thank you to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay, and congratulations to the attackers, commiserations to the defenders. As far as what's coming up next, it is actually another battle that was given to me by Red Knight, one that I perhaps should have shown on a previous version of the game, but unfortunately because of version numbers shifting and all of that, I actually was unable to show it. But the map was rerun, and we will see it as the next siege battle, which is an Evil Men inspired defence, which based on the look of the settlement has more of a Candish look about it. So yeah, good on the attack, evil on the defence on that occasion. A 4v4 as well, so the defenders maybe have a little bit more of a fair crack at the whip in comparison to these 5v3s. We'll see if they are able to pull off the victory there. Going forward as well, I've got the continuing tournament battles, which will be mostly occupying those midweek slots as well as any sort of Last Alliance replays that we get. And going further forwards, of course, like I said, the channel has re-expanded out now to a guaranteed 2 videos a week, maybe on occasion 3 if I'm able to do so and there is something suitable. But that's on a case-by-case basis. Anyway, I'll stop rambling at the end of these replays. I've really got to learn to stop doing that. Big thank you to Red/Green Knight once again. Big thank you to all the players. I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.